Think for yourself. Question authority.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, in this video, we got a lot to talk about with Switch 2 and all this information coming out from VGC today. And of course, there's going to be a lot of other channels talking about this as well. So if you could do me a big favor and hit the like button for me, that will help out a lot with this video. And let's get started. So Nintendo, of course, has been really quiet about next generation plans for the upcoming successor to the Nintendo Switch. But that hasn't stopped the talk and chatter about this upcoming system from Nintendo. And no doubt we have lots of evidence and proof that it is coming, most likely next year. And we have multiple pieces of information that have come lately about this, with the latest information coming now from VGC. And most recently, just within the last month, we've had parts and suppliers talking about the build of the console being manufactured at Foxconn, and another parts and supplier by the name of Pixar talking about how they expect another console coming in early 2024 in the first quarter from a console manufacturer that hasn't actually released any new consoles for quite some time, that have been absent. And obviously everyone thinks about Nintendo when they think of a company that hasn't released a console in quite some time. You can put two and two together. It looks like the Nintendo Switch 2 is coming in 2024. Now, the debate, of course, is whether or not this is going to be early 2024, like these parts and suppliers both say. There's two of them now saying this, early 2024, and this new information coming from VGC from their sources claiming that it could be the second half of 2024. But either way, it looks like we're getting a new Switch, next generation Switch from Nintendo in 2024. So first of all, let's look at the information from VGC from their website here. And this is really interesting. But basically, they're talking about dev kits. Dev kits for Nintendo's next generation console are now with key partner studios with launch plan for next year, sources have told VGC. So they go on to say, according to multiple people with knowledge of Nintendo's next-gen console plans, the company's likely to release new hardware during the second half of 2024 to ensure that it has ample stock available on day one and to avoid the kind of shortages seen with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. Although specific details in the console are being kept closely guarded, those VGC spoke to indicated that the next-gen console will be able to be used in portable mode similar to the Nintendo Switch. And then they say that two sources VGC spoke to suggested that the console will launch with an LCD screen, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, instead of a more premium OLED screen in order to bring costs down, especially considering the increased storage needed for higher fidelity games, which kind of hints at that this is going to be a console that is going to be outputting games at higher fidelity, greater than 1080p most likely. The current Switch comes with just 32GB of internal memory, while many current gen PlayStation and Xbox games are over 100GB just on their own, yeah. And then they say, like its predecessor, the new Nintendo console will also accept physical games via a cartridge slot, while other details such as backwards compatibility support for Switch games remains unclear. And then after this point, they go on to an opinion piece, which is actually not part of the information. I think people got this confused. This is not something that is being reported that, you know, the Nintendo is not thinking about having backwards compatibility, or they are thinking about backwards compatibility, or if they're interested in reselling games basically for, you know, like remasters or remakes for their next console. This information is not saying that. They go on to have an opinion piece basically saying that some third-party publishers are said to have expressed concern that legacy support for Switch games could negatively affect sales of next-gen titles. That's just an opinion, really, so we don't know for sure about that. But let's talk about, first of all, that quite possibly this Switch 2 will be released in the second half of 2024. And I'm definitely not telling you which way you should believe here, but I'm just going to share my thoughts on this. And even though the VGC has a good track record, this information could actually be incorrect when it comes down to things. But now, the reason why I say that is because if you look at these other reports from these manufacturers that actually are developing the consoles, they have both said early 2024. Now, and if I were somebody who was, you know, thinking about which ones were correct, I would probably lean more into the people actually making the console than sources that may or may not know the plans for Nintendo's marketing. This is something that Nintendo could actually still be debating on what date range they're going to release this console. Now, it's true that while they could be indicating to parts and suppliers that they need to have this console ready by early 2024, because that's when they may be thinking of releasing it, they could also be thinking of building up stock, as they are saying here in the VGC article, that they want to avoid those shortages that have hampered the other consoles in this generation already, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S, that maybe they want to continue building up stock for release in a second half of 2024, but they informed the parts and suppliers who are making the console that they want to have it ready by early 2024 in Q1. So Nintendo might still be on the fringes of deciding what the exact date is that they're going to be releasing this, and they may have a broad range of a March to December basically time frame of 2024 of when they want to release this console. And it all depends on who is developing and making it for them. And most likely, like I brought out in previous videos, I do think it's going to be Samsung is going to be playing a key factor and role in developing and manufacturing parts of this console, basically the SoC most likely. So this is very interesting, but I just want to make sure I was very clear on that, is that we don't know 100% for sure if they would really know the time frame of when this console is going to be released, because it looks like Nintendo is not quite sure yet either. They probably assume it's second half of 2024, but according to these parts and suppliers, they are saying early 2024. So we got to keep that in mind. It could be a range that we're looking at here, but either way, I do think 2024 is going to be the time frame from when we see this console. Now, in regards to this LCD talk about this new Switch not having an OLED screen, I've seen a lot of disappointment from people already, assuming this is correct, of course, that the new Switch would not have an OLED screen. Now, again, it's very unlikely Nintendo has even decided on quite which screen they're going to use at this point either, because it's a well-known fact that the screen is the easiest part, basically the last part pretty much. So it's probably not decided yet what screen they're going to be using. However, I do want to bring up that it's not all a lost cause if they do use an LCD screen, because there is very cost-effective LCD screens that are high quality, like IPS displays. And what is an IPS LCD screen, you ask? Well, it stands for in-plane switching for the screen. It is an electronic screen display technology used in LCDs that changes the behavior of the LCD to produce sharper, more accurate picture. Also, it allows for the viewing display to not be blurred or to not lose its clarity and focus very much at viewing angles. And this could be a much more practical sense of using an LCD display for Switch 2. If they use an IPS display, you get a clearer, sharper image, plus you would have higher viewing fidelity at different angles of the console as well. However, we just don't know for sure yet because it's still early, and if this console is not coming out until second half of 2024, it's very unlikely that Nintendo has chosen which screen they're going to be using, because it's quite frankly just something they can put on at the very end. As long as they get a certain type of price that they're looking for, they could still be using an OLED screen, they could be using an IPS display, or yeah, they could be using an LCD display, which obviously would not be the very good choice to use, but I do think it's too early to be saying that this is confirmed or something like that for Nintendo's next console, especially if it's a year out. It's highly unlikely the screen has been decided upon yet. So people perhaps overreacting about this right now, maybe we should take a step back and just wait and see a little bit, because we still got quite some time yet before we see this console in full action. So the next topic though is, what about that backwards compatibility that they were talking about in this article? Now, regarding that, we got to think that this is a completely new Switch, right? So that means brand new chip. It's probably not going to have any relation to the Tegra X1, which came out in 2015, which is 8 years ago now, over 8 years ago. It's going on 9 years old, that chip. So it's highly unlikely Switch 2 is going to have anything in line with the Tegra X1 processor. They're going to have a completely new chip, new motherboard, new RAM, new everything. So like we talked about way back in 2019, if you recall, if you were a subscriber of mine since then, you would know that we talked about Nintendo was actually hiring for developers to basically make an emulation type of layer of software for a new piece of hardware, which is looking like, obviously, there were early plans to have that for their next generation Switch, which back then we referred to as Switch Pro, right? Because we didn't know when it was coming out. So that was the early plans to have some type of operating system or OS emulation that they were having for a new piece of hardware. So if that is still the case, obviously times may have changed since then, but more than likely it's more true ever than now than before, because this new console is going to have technology that's just not the same as a Switch. It's just way too new. Switch is way too old now. So if that's the case, and if Nintendo is sending out development kits to developers now for work on games that are coming to this new system, and they're not ports, and they're obviously not going to be just running old games on the new console, right? There's absolutely no reason why Nintendo would even have backwards compatibility available on early dev kits if it's not something that they're ready to show yet, or if it's not even something that's functioning yet on the new console. It would simply be an OS update later on as a software layer, because like we were just saying, if they're going to do backwards compatibility, it's not confirmed or not, right? But if they are, it's most likely going to be via software emulation at some level. You know, Nintendo has all the access to the Nintendo Switch and all its MVN, you know, drivers and everything like that, and all the APIs. They could emulate the Switch on the Switch 2 very easily with a software layer. Probably though, if it's coming out in second half of 2024, the emulation or whatever they're using to do backwards compatibility for the Switch 2 from the Switch OG is simply not ready yet. So there's no reason why they would have it in early dev kits if they are doing it. Now, obviously, they could also not have backwards compatibility and just resell games again at higher prices on the new console and continue doing that, or they could have backwards compatibility and still, like PlayStation does with the PS5, resell games yet again with better graphics just as a standalone release, and not have them have any patches or any modifications on their backwards compatibility version of it on their Switch 2. I believe The Last of Us Part 2 is a good example of that, or The Last of Us is as well. It runs better on the PlayStation 5. There's certain games that run better via patches on PlayStation 5, and there's still like reports of them being remade soon, like The Last of Us Part 2. Horizon Zero Dawn is a good example. They got a patch to run at 60 frames per second, but there's also strong rumors, credible rumors, that they're also remaking Horizon Zero Dawn for the PlayStation 5. So either and or, personally, I think it's probably fine either way, even if it doesn't have backwards compatibility. I know it's a huge issue for people. They bring this up, but if it doesn't have BC for the Switch 2, I'm going to be fine because I still have my current Switch. But if they do have it, that's great as well. People do like backwards compatibility, so they have everything on one console. It would also give people the ability to trade in their current Switch to get a discount on the Switch 2 as well. I do think Nintendo has heavily hinted that the Switch 2 will have some kind of backwards compatibility with the Switch due to all the things they've been saying about having your, converting as many people over to the Switch's 100 million user base from the old system to the new system, things like that. So when that kind of stuff is said, it does heavily lean more toward, in my opinion at least, backwards compatibility being there for this new Switch. Just because the developers or sources or people who happen to have information about these dev kits, just because they don't know if it's backwards compatible or not, doesn't mean it's not happening. It could just mean, like we said, the software that Nintendo's developing to make it have BC, since it's completely new hardware, isn't quite ready yet. So really, guys, when you think about it, this is pretty cool information, and it's nice to talk about something that isn't just some kind of rumor from some random forum user, right? So this is actually coming from a credible source for a change, which is nice to see that. And we could be seeing Switch 2 sooner rather than later. Now, some people may, assume that if this is true, we won't get an announcement of Switch 2 until next year, if this is the case. But yet again, I gotta remind you guys, parts and suppliers are expecting this thing to be released in the first half of 2024, early 2024. So it depends on what Nintendo wants to do here. It depends on how far ahead they are on their production, and whether or not you want to believe VG sources here or the parts and supplier sources here. both are good, I would say. But either way, when Nintendo announces it, then you most likely be seeing this console sooner rather than later. So could they be announcing it in 2023 and then releasing it by the end of March of 2024? Yeah, I would say that's still possible. Or could they be waiting till January, announcing it then and releasing it in the second half of 2024? Yeah, that's very much possible. Does this sway your opinion whether or not that will happen more in favor of 2024 being announced? We'll have to wait and see, right? In my opinion, I'm kind of unchanged here. I still think they could announce it this year for release in early 2024 based on the information that we've seen from two sources from the parts and suppliers. And this information here from VGC basically is reaffirming that this console is coming in 2024. So either way, guess what? We win. So either way, it's all good. I'm good with either one. And I would really be in favor, personally, of Nintendo waiting and having more supply so everyone can have a chance to buy the Switch 2 in the first place. If they just release the Switch 2, say in March 31st of 2024 or April of 2024, and only have a couple million to sell, those things are going to be gone in a matter of seconds. So we're not going to have a chance to even play it. You're going to have to wait anyway till later in 2024 until they get more stock. So all those things play a factor, guys, but it all depends on Nintendo's choices here and where they are in the actual manufacturing, how fast they can make these consoles for us to play it. All those things are unknown right now, but it's looking really, really good for 2024. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Please do hit that like button if you could and subscribe for more. I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.